more wrong. And I know Vince is tuning in right now. All three of us really with the 17 and a half. South Florida got absolutely
Yeah.
humbled by Miami 49-12. And it leads into the next game, Miami versus Florida. And, listen, I know this is kind of that interstate battle, right? Florida
Mhm.
1-2, Miami 3-0. Florida's coming off a loss against LSU. They lost to South Florida, two straight losses. They haven't been able to run the football particularly well. And I think that's going to be an issue against Miami. Listen, explain this to me. So it's like I'm a 2-year-old. Explain this to me. So last week you have a game in which the line was 17 and a half. I think it closed right around 18.
Mhm.
Now I would say South Florida is better than Florida, but Florida is 1-2, and yet Miami's only laying 7.5 in this one. And last week it was 17 and a half.
It is funny how those odds work considering USF just beat Florida 2 weeks ago in Gainesville, right? And they had, they were ranked and then they were everyone's Cinderella story through 2 games this season or 3 games, whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden they get waxed by Miami. I didn't think Miami was going to blow them out like that. I figured Miami was going to win the game maybe by, considering it's a 17 and a half point line. I'm like, okay, 14,
Yeah. Yeah.
late touchdown, you win. I don't know, 35-21 or something, 34-17, and you just cover. But I didn't expect that. They absolutely blew them out of the water. If you take stock into what USF has done this year, then you have to say that's a pretty darn impressive win for Miami, considering I know USF is not a Power Four team, but they're one of those Group of Five contenders that could come back around at the end of the year and say, "Hey, we're trying to vie for that lone Group of Five spot in the college football playoffs." So that is a pretty impressive win by Miami. Miami looks really, really good right now. They look like a more complete team right now than they did last year. Ironically, without a number one overall pick at quarterback, now that they have Carson Beck, who transferred in from Georgia. As far as the line is concerned, I guess this is just the being it's a Power Four matchup. Florida's still that SEC team, but I mean, just like last week, Hugh, I was like, I'm looking at LSU where Florida comes thin. I'm like 7.5. I'm going to take the 7.5 here. And LSU, I know it wasn't a great game by any means for LSU offensively. And I think it was later revealed that Garrett Nussmeier has been dealing with a torso injury. Now, whether that's vastly affected the offense, I guess is to be determined over the next couple of weeks. But the fact that they still covered that in a bad offensive game,
Yeah.
realistically for LSU last week, I know Brian Kelly was, in everybody's face
Yep.
immediately
Yep.
after the post game, of course. But the fact that they still cover that, I'm just like, why wouldn't you take Miami minus 7.5 right now? Because frankly, I can't trust Florida at all anymore, considering DJ Lagway was picked off 5 times last week. They can't run the ball much, despite the fact they have a good running back in Jaden Ball who can also catch out of the backfield. And it seemed like anytime Florida was trying to get something done offensively last week, it was through Jaden Ball, not DJ Lagway, who turned it over 5 times. Miami has a much more explosive offense right now than LSU. So points of plenty for the Hurricanes. I just can't see Florida rebounding until, this could be the one game where it's like, oh my God, they saved Billy Napier's job by upsetting Miami. You know what I mean? But I can't see it. I've put too much trust in Florida over the past year and a half, 2 years with Billy Napier. They've consistently let me down. And I think just judging by what LSU was able to do last week at home against Florida with that amount, I think it was actually the same line, 7.5. So Miami, who I think is right now is better than LSU. Maybe the defense isn't as good as LSU's, but that offense is ridiculous. The way offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson runs it right now. Carson Beck's playing right now the best he's ever
Really good
played.
football.
To me, this is Miami. I'm thinking Q maybe a 14, 15,
Does
21 point win here for Miami. I think they're going to destroy them actually.
does a dominating win like this, kind of to Vince's point, believe in Cristobal now, right? He says, "Do I have to believe in Cristobal now?" Was talking to a U fan, and I think the last five are where they fall short in the season on the road to VT and Pitt. So, if this is a dominating performance, do we really start to take this team, this university, and Cristobal as the legit when we're talking about college football playoff series?
I think as far as taking them legit, I think you have to even get dating back to last year. I know they kind of blew it last year, especially with that loss to Syracuse, which essentially kept them out of the college football playoff. If they win that game, they're 11-1. They're playing for the conference title against Clemson, or I believe it would have been Clemson. I forget who would have. I forget who got in last year between Clemson and SMU over Miami based on the tiebreakers. I believe it was Clemson, or in any event. Miami's playing for the ACC title last year. If they beat Syracuse, they're 11-1, and whether they win or lose that game, they're going to get into the playoff. So they're 10-2. They miss out. Bad loss to Syracuse. But I think with the way Cristobal's been able to attack the portal, the way he's been recruiting, the fact that they won 10 games last year, you know, and you get a guy like Cam Moore, I know it was via the transfer portal, but the fact that you can get a guy like that, and now a guy like Carson Beck, who's seemingly resurrecting his college career after, kind of going down the dumps a little bit at Georgia, despite the fact, the stat line would tell you differently, but the perception around Carson Beck really wasn't that positive last year. And plus the injury obviously threw him, threw another wrench in those plans for Georgia as well. So to me, I'm buying stock in Mario Cristobal. If they dominate Florida, I think they're definitely going to be buying stock, more so than they were even just last week. The ACC is Miami to lose now. I know SMU's still lurking.
Yep.
Florida State's obviously a factor again, at least through their first two games. Clemson losing their second game of the year already, kind of not a non-factor, but major question marks. So to me, the ACC is once again now Miami's to lose. If they don't win the ACC, not gonna say Marcus was gonna get fired, but I think you'll definitely see the pressure cooker start to build up with the Hurricanes. But as far as like Virginia Tech and Pitt are concerned, Virginia Tech's a dumpster fire right now. Having just fired Brent Pry, they just got waxed by Old Dominion of all
Which,
teams.
by the way, we said that coach was on the hot seat prior to the season.
Yeah,
We were
he was.
talking
He
about
gets
worst
fired in
case.
the same weekend, Deshaun Foster. I
Yep.
didn't expect that, but I know, but UCLA's been horrendous this year.
Yeah.
I didn't actually expect Deshaun Foster to get fired in the middle of his second season. Brent Pry, a little bit more logical, I'd say, as far as
Yeah.
coach firings are concerned, but both those programs are dumpster fires. But relating it back to Miami, I don't think they're going to have too much trouble with Virginia Tech. Maybe they'll stub their toe somewhere else. If they do, Pitt, maybe a game where they stub their toes. Pitt's always going to be, one of those rough teams where you're just like, how the heck are they beating them that they lose, the next week or something like that. So, but I think Miami's going to wax Florida this week at this point. I would love to be, my childhood self as a Florida fan would love to be proven wrong, but I mean, Miami, I think is just too good right now. And we're talking, if they wax them, I think we're talking about, all right, this team should go 11-1, if not 12-0, win the ACC, and we're talking maybe a top 2 seed in the college football playoff.
I can see them maybe tripping up against SMU. I know SMU's on the road against TCU this weekend, but I can see him maybe tripping up against SMU.
I could see that too. Yeah, I mean, let's not forget the fact that SMU is an intriguing football team. I know they're 2-1 right now, and the fact they lost to Baylor in that overtime game, people are like, "All right, we're ready to write SMU off now," as they've beaten. I think it was like East Tennessee, and I don't even know who the hell they played last week. I think it was Missouri State or something. So when you look at their schedule so far, it's like, well, they've beaten two teams they should have, and they lost in overtime.
Right.
That maybe we're buying stock in again in Baylor, but now all of a sudden, they're kind of like that Jekyll and Hyde team right now. So I'm, just on an aside, I'm interested to see how SMU plays against TCU on the road. Because now TCU is one of those popular teams where, all right, if it's not Utah or Iowa State, it's like, oh yeah, TCU's back in that Big 12 picture. So as far as SMU is concerned with an out of conference game, yeah, I will. If SMU plays well or wins that game against TCU, then yeah, I'd say Miami's next circled game is probably going to be that TCU game, or excuse me, that SMU game, because I believe they, if I remember correctly, I think they play them before they play Florida State. I could be wrong. Actually,
Correct. They do.
Florida
No,
State.
no, no,
Yeah,
no. The
Florida State
Miami
against
plays Florida State.
Yeah,
Then
that's
later
the
on they
next
play
game. So I
SMU.
think if they, just to kind of bring it all together, if Miami blows Florida out of the water, then it's like, all right, they will be favorites, maybe even be favorites on the road against Florida State at this point. And it's like, all right, Florida State circled, SMU circled, which game trips them up? And then, but at this point, I think Miami is one of the best teams in the country, at least through 3 games.
Yeah. And SMU did lose. I'm sorry, they did beat Missouri State, but by 18, 28 to
Yeah,
10. You really can't.
that's what I'm saying. East Tennessee, Missouri State. It's like,
Yeah.
I get not buying stock into them right now,
Yep.
but they are by no means all of a sudden like last year them making the conference title game. That was no fluke. They were a good football team, and again, don't forget they did make the college football playoff. Controversy aside, if you want to play that card, they made the playoff last year. This team is not too far off, I would say, from that team last year.
I think the next